Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today on this training video on Microsoft Word skills. 3 tips to making big impacts in big documents. I'm your host, George Brockman. We'll be taking a quick look at some critical tools within Microsoft Word that even many seasoned users don't know about. We get used to sitting down and typing, and for many documents that's fine. However, the longer or more complex a document, the more some of these simple tools can save time and elevate the appearance of your document. We will be talking about the style elements in Word, take a more comprehensive look at the quality check beyond just spell checking, and then making it easier to find things in the document later. Style, proofing, and indexing are 3 key tools. I've had a long career in IT and in management, and while I'm a natural nerd, I love digging into these things. It doesn't take any special skills or technical ability to use the techniques I'm going to be showing you. We will be focusing on 3 key underutilized techniques. As of this video, these features have been around in Word for at least 10 years and have changed very little. I won't go very deep into them, but I'm confident you can pick up enough in this video and get big payoff with just a little bit of effort, big reward. These techniques are most relevant to large documents, but even a 2 or 3 page document can benefit from some of them. Let's start by working with style. I want to stress now that all of these features and capabilities are native to Word. There are no third-party utilities necessary, nothing to buy or to add in. We're going to be talking about the principles and the benefits. We'll be talking about the why, as well as the how. These ideas really pay off on big documents, but they're great habits to have even for small documents. In Word, you have styles. You have attributes that set up your fonts and paragraphs and layout of document content, and they are grouped together into styles as a single setting. So one style can have settings of different fonts, a specific font and a size. It also can include layouts, and it also can include things like frames and borders. Themes, on the other hand, are collections of styles. By changing the theme of a document, the user refreshes the styles in that document to a new definition. We're going to spend a lot less time manually editing the formatting of text. By this, I mean when you highlight a line of text and you may go over and say what the font is and what the size is, and even things like centering or left to right aligning, all those attributes that describe the appearance of the text are no longer going to be done manually on a section by section basis or word by word even. The benefit of this is it reduces the chance that we have a body of a portion of our text that has a one-off or an odd looking style. It's very difficult to have consistent, coherent text appearance when you've done things manually setting up your content this way. It also takes advantage of some built-in features in Word, and some of these styles that we want to use will actually make the tool treat the content differently, automatically, without any extra settings from us. It also makes it easier and safer to experiment, or if you're working towards a new document standard and then saving that standard. We want to be able to try things out and not risk losing things in the complexity of the document, to make sweeping changes quickly. So before we go into Word, let's take a look at some of these elements. What we see here is the theme layout or the preview for the design of a theme. And you see that there are a collection of different themes here. When you select the Design tab, you can pick a theme from the document, and each theme has different colors and different definitions for the styles within it. Once we've done that, we can go back to the Home menu and we can pick a style that is part of that theme, and each time you change the theme, you change the definition of that style. But this is simply as simple as highlighting the text, and then instead of clicking on font settings, you pick what style is appropriate for your document. We can modify the style, so even if it comes with a specific theme, we can take it and make it our own. The use of headers is a great example. It's where you can set sections of your document and indicate that they're heading 1 or heading 2 or heading 3. And those are hierarchies of sections and subsections. By doing it this way, we're actually not just controlling how the document looks, but how Word treats those particular parts of text. Now in Office 365, you may see the view of styles looks a little bit different, but essentially it's fairly familiar, and you should be able to go back and forth no matter which version you have. You still have the name of the style and kind of a sneak preview of what that style would look like if you applied it. So whether you're using this version or the newer version, it should be familiar enough that you should be able to get through these exercises. We've talked enough about the idea and the principle. Let's look in Word and actually work with a real example. So here I have a kind of dummy document, but it has all the elements that you should be familiar with. There's a title, there's a table of contents, or at least in theory there's one. There are different chapters, and there are even sections within those chapters that we're going to be wanting to customize. We want to be able to find a way to really take ownership of those. So let's say here I'm not really happy with the style or the appearance of my section here. I could come in and say, well, I actually want my section headers to be a little bit different. Maybe I want them to be kind of a green text here, and I'm going to do the same for each of these. I'm a little bit bigger and green. And you'll see if I'm doing this, I have to go through and find each of the section headers, make sure only to select the section headers, and then apply this different orientation or view or perspective. Maybe I want my chapters to be even bigger than that, so we'll bump those up as two as well. Now I got feedback from my manager, and he says no, green is not acceptable. You can make it dark blue if you want, so we're going to do that. We're going to go through and change. And as you can see, as you can imagine, it doesn't take much for me to miss a section. The longer the document is, it doesn't take much for me to kind of, oops, maybe one of these is 1 pixel off from the others. Really, it's really challenging, and the farther you get into it, the harder it is to be keeping up with it. I also have a problem because if I go down here and I add some extra space, my chapter 2 is now rolled down to the next page. But there's nothing here but a static number that says this is page 1. Well, I have to come in and update this. Very troubling. There's no good, easy way to keep this safely updated and help me avoid my own errors. So let's apply the styles now and see if this gets any easier. First thing I want to do is I want to take this document, and I like to just kind of start with a clean slate. I've got the text, I've got the content, but I'm going to go through and apply styles from a clean slate, if you will. So I'll go up to my style drop down, and I want to start off by saying clear formatting. And now all of a sudden our text is plain text. Everything's left aligned using the normal default settings within Word for what text is supposed to look like. So now let's go through and let's get a little creative with our styles. First off, this is the document title. So let's see if I have a style that is named title. And we do. So I'm going to apply the title to that line of text. Notice if I come down here, it goes back to normal or nothing is highlighted. If I go back up onto the title line, though, it recognizes that this is still a title. Now I'm going to save the details of this for later, but I'm going to go ahead and just delete the table of contents. I'm just not going to be happy with the way it was handling it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, this is a chapter, this is a section, this is a top heading, if you will. So I'm going to call it heading 1. Well, I can do the same with chapter 2. That's going to be a heading 1 too. It's a top level. So it's not because it's the first chapter or the first heading, but because it's the topmost. It's the most senior or in the hierarchy, if you will. My sections, though, are immediately dependent upon my chapter. So they're going to be called heading 2. So I'm going to find my section 1 and make it a heading 2. And same for all my other sections. The good news is while this is a tad tedious, it's a matter of just going back in and highlighting. So now, if I decide that, that I want my headings, maybe I do like that idea of it being blue or something like that, I can actually come back and modify the heading, not the individual line. So if I were to say I want my heading to be a little bit different, I'm going to modify it by right-clicking and saying modify. And here's where I have a chance to maybe I want to change the color. I could even say, well, I don't want it to be quite that big. It looks an awful lot like the chapter style. So I've just made it smaller and blue. And I've done that for all the things marked section 2. So we have a huge time saver here. Now let's look at the document title. Now, my original title was centered, and I kind of favor that. So I'm going to come up here and modify the title as well. And again, I have the chance to update the formatting here with the font name and the size and color, whether it's underlined or centered. I can say, though, I do want it centered. And I can even do some extra stuff. So let's look at some of our options. We can come in here and define the borders. Do language element things. We can set up the frames and things about the numbering schemes and so forth. I'm going to just do something simple. We're going to look at the paragraph. And we're going to say, well, before each title, I want to make sure that maybe there's 15 points above. And after the title, I want there to be 30 points below. So I go ahead and hit apply. And you'll notice the title's centered up because of my earlier change, as well as dropping down a little bit and pushing everything else down as well. With the chapter settings, when I get to a really large document, what I like to do often is go under the heading style. We're going to say modify. And I love to go in here and say I want to format the paragraph again. And I can go under line and page break. And I can say I want to break before, put a page break before each chapter. So if I do this and I hit OK, and now I'm going to save that change. And you'll notice now that the heading disappeared from the document altogether. I'm going to zoom out so you can see I've got my document title, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Great. They're all spread out. Well, while we're here and we have everything so spread out, let's go ahead and say we want to look at a table of contents. So I'm going to click on the references, and you can see references here on the menu. And I want to select table of contents. And I have several different styles of tables of contents. I'm just going to go ahead and grab this one. This is an automatic table of content. Oops, and it put it on the second page. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit to see what it did for us. And it recognized that chapter 1 was on page 2 and chapter 2 is on page 3. That's exactly how it is. And if I wanted to come over here to chapter 2 and give it an updated name. And this is the beginning. There you go. And maybe on the Chapter 2, I want to give it a title as well, and notice how that title keeps going. Okay, so I've now changed both my titles, both my chapter names, and you'll see here, it hasn't really done anything. Well, if I right click on this region here, this table of contents, I can say that I want to update my table. And I changed more than the page numbers. I changed the headings on the table. So let's go ahead and say update the whole table. Doesn't cost that much more. But now you can see the new titles for the chapters has been applied. I don't have to worry about making sure every place it's been impacted it's getting changed. And I can even go back now. Let's go back and say, this one page page break, it may be a little much. So I'm going to modify that, and I'm going to undo that setting. So under paragraph, page break before. No, I don't want to do that. But I do want to modify a paragraph. And I do want to give us maybe a little extra space, 22 above, and maybe 10 below. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say OK here, and OK again. And you'll see automatically the document updated. The chapters are now on the same page, and it's all rolled together. And you can guess now why the table of contents went to its own page, because the table of content title is a level 1 heading as well. But let's look and see if we say I want to update my field. Noticing the page numbers here, it still thinks that chapter 1 is on page 3 and chapter 2 on 4. If I say I want to update the field, I don't have to do the whole table. I can just do page numbers because I know only the page numbers have been changed. And you'll see automatically it recomputed where those are. I don't have to do this every time I make a change that may update page numbering or something like that. But at least before I print, if I remember to go through and update my settings, I can see the benefit of the results. Now there are other things we won't go very far into, but I do want to kind of call them out. Let's say in my chapter 2, in the first section, I have something that I want to refer to. A section, something that was in a section on the previous chapter. I could actually insert a reference, and I can say I want to insert a cross-reference, and I can use headings as part of my content. Now I want to refer to the chapter 1, section 1, and you'll see here that I just inserted section 1, Flight of the Bumblebee. I can even hit, say, don't put the text there, but see what page number. And it's giving me the page number as well. So I can say, now go see this section on page 1, and I've got my cross-reference. Again, when this document updates and refreshes and pages change, because these are references to headings and referencing to pages of headings, I can simply update the field. I don't have to go back and track all the changes. Incredibly powerful stuff. A little bit extra work, but a huge payoff. Okay, so let's look back at what we've accomplished so far. We've looked at styles and how to apply them. We've looked at how to leverage styles to simplify document management. And we've also taken advantage of the headings to set up a table of contents that will let Word keep up with the changes so we don't have to. There are several really high quality third-party tools that will let us look at our document and give us feedback on our grammar and our writing style. But let's see what Word has already built in. Before we go off and buy some third-party product, let's give Word a chance to see what kind of feedback we can get from it. Again, we're looking at native capability. No third-party products need to be bought. First, we want to go in under Options by clicking on File, Options, and this will pull up this Word Options dialog, and we want to select Proofing. Now you can see several check boxes to be filled in here, and I recommend checking it pretty generously on the things that apply. But we want to go to the Proofing section, and we want to look down especially down at that bottom section under correcting spelling and grammar in Word. And we want to show readability statistics. Now this option turns on more than just, is it spelled correctly? This gives us a chance to really open up the feedback. We'll make sure that we've selected writing styles. We've chosen grammar and refinements. And then let's click on that settings button and see what it gives us. You'll see a fairly lengthy list of options to check from, including things like grammar and inclusivity and clarity and brevity. You want to make sure that you're getting as much feedback as you can, and then you can choose what is relevant and not relevant as you're getting that feedback. Don't be intimidated by what it says it thinks you are doing, we'll say wrong. Well, let it give all the feedback, and then keep an open mind and see what it tells you about your writing style. So for example, we've set all the settings up to give us as much feedback as is available. Let's look at the findings. So we want to select review on the document information, and we want to choose editor. This editor gives us a little feedback dialog that gives us a summary of the performance of what it found and what areas it found them in. So in this example document, you can see there was not many spelling errors, but a lot of grammar feedback, but also some feedback in terms of conciseness and how much formality we have, some punctuation conventions that weren't followed consistently, and even some text that if this was a resume, it would give us feedback on resume-oriented writing styles as well. So all this feedback comes in handy. And at the bottom, we can look at the document statistics. And this is that one thing we turned on that earlier screen that I think is very interesting. We have here word counts and so forth, but there are also some fairly interestingly calculated fields down towards the bottom on readability. These are based on some pretty sophisticated calculations and looking at your document about number of syllables per word, number of words per sentence, and so forth. And the Flesch reading scale the Flesch reading ease score, a higher number would indicate that it is a easier to read document. And this is saying basically, as you could see from the conciseness and clarity findings, it didn't give it all that high of a reading ease score. The Flesch Kincaid grade level score gives you an approximation of US-based education grade level readability. So what we're seeing here is that a 8.9, you're looking at an 8th grade level should be able to have no trouble reading this document. That's what it sees as the target audience for this document. And the number of passive sentences is not very flattering as well. Well, think about that, because in business writing especially, you want active sentences. You want the active, go forward, positive sentences. And passive sentence structures are a bit of a problem in many business writing circles. So we've got some feedback from Word on our document. We've seen the readability scores and feedback in that area. But what exactly is it telling us we may want to consider changing? So let's look again at the editor in the feedback tab here. And we want to go through and want to look at, well, for formal writing, is this formal? Is this professional? What are we writing? What style are we writing for? What is our target? I'm going to leave it at formal for right now, and we're going to look at some of the clarity recommendations. And it's going to come right up and say, hey, there's the first one we found, RMA, saying who or what did the action would be clearer if we updated this in some way. It's making some recommendations. Doesn't have any suggestions, but it's telling me to consider looking at how I worded this. Well, it's got 69 remaining findings. So let's look what else it found. So I'm going to go to this right arrow.
Try rewording to avoid a confusing double negative. This is not the same as, and I can see where it's saying that's maybe can be changed to this is different from as a good suggestion to consider. And actually, if I want to apply this change, I can actually click on it. And so just simply by going through this list and clicking on the ideas or clicking on the things, I can see what it found and what it thinks could be improved upon, and if it has some suggestions. Now this is in the clarity section. I can also go for conciseness or punctuation conventions. And it's simply things like the after all it. Just say it. Be brief, be concise. Clean it up. Again, going through this long list can take some time, but it gives you a good chance to at least look at a document the way somebody else, or in this case, the computer, thinks it could be made to be improved. Challenges you to think about your own writing style and what you do and don't want to adjust.
The longer and more formal the document is, the more helpful it is to offer the reader an index. Unfortunately, it's also more daunting a task the longer and more formal the document is. With the goal to make the document more searchable, we can add an index that provides that list of words and the locations of those terms, phrases within the body of the document. There are really two different ways to approach this task. We can do it manually, a word at a time, highlighting the term and marking it for reference. Or we can use a concordance and we can automatically index a whole collection of words and phrases all in one pass. We're going to look at both. In the simplest approach, we can simply do one word at a time in single entry. We would simply highlight the term that we want to add the reference for, select the reference tab, and then select Mark Entry. Once we select Mark Entry, we have the option to either mark just this one instance of the word, or every matching case we can use the term Mark All, and that will find all the instances of that specific word that you have highlighted. The second approach, we can auto mark or automatically mark the entries throughout the document. In order to accomplish this, we have to do something first, a little housekeeping. We have to build a file with a list of terms, and basically it's a table with two columns. As we put on the left column the word that we want to be found, and on the right column how we want it to appear. Very often it's the same thing, but every once in a while you'll find a case where you want to call it something else. You want to save and close the file before proceeding. And then you return to the References tab and select Insert Index and select Auto Mark. Now that the document is all marked up and you've set your references up, we want to return to the normal view by clicking on the paragraph key, or the paragraph button rather, on the Home tab. This returns the view of the document to something normal, a preview like what the reader would expect to see. Then you will want to go to the section of the document where you want that index to be inserted. And we'll select the References tab and select Insert Index. Next, you simply select OK, and it'll add the index section into the document at the location you were previously at. So now we're going to take a look at both the methods of setting up our indexes for making things easy to find in our documents. We're going to first off look at the concordance, just kind of as a reference. I've already set this up, and you'll see on the left is a column of phrases that I want to be found within the document, and on the right
is the way I want those phrases to be labeled. Most of the time, you'll probably find that they're identical, but sometimes you may choose to have an alternate description next to the phrase. So that comes with style and experience and how you like to set yours up. But I'm going to go ahead and close this down right now, and we'll go back and look at our document now. And we're going to do the first method that I showed you first. And then all we're going to do is we're going to go to references, and we're going to want to mark an entry. So first I want to make sure I have an entry, a word highlighted that I want to flag. Say I want to have conversation flagged as in the index. So I'm going to mark that entry, and it's going to mark the entry for me. It says with conversation. Now I could capitalize it and say I want it when it's listed to be capitalized, or I could leave it the way it is. I'm going to go ahead and capitalize it. I can either mark individually this one word to be indexed, or I can mark all the instances of conversation so that on the index it will tell me the page numbers where every conversation, every use of conversation shows up. I'm going to go ahead and mark all. I like if the word is important enough to be indexed, I like to go ahead and mark them throughout the document. And you'll see pretty quickly it marked my document up. I'm going to go ahead and close it and see what it did is it added a tag that said next to wherever this word is, or actually where this tag exists, and there's going to be one next to that word throughout the document, is a tag for indexing the entry conversation. Now the other way to do that would be simply to say I want to insert the index, but instead of inserting an index yet, I want to go ahead and auto mark. Auto mark is going to ask me to select a document, so I'm going to come up here and select one of my documents up here. I have to go back and now find where I put that little bad boy. So it's under there. So I found my file that I want to use as a concordance. Now, for example, I want to mark this up with the concordance that I created as a master file. So I'm going to click on Insert Index. I'm going to do Auto Mark, and I'm going to go find that document that I had created earlier. So here's the file. And what it's doing right now is going through all the places in the document where each of those terms are used, and it's inserting a mark for me. At the completion of that, I'm going to let it finish its job. I'm going to take notice again still that it is highlighting with all the places where an entry was done. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off just to make the screen a little bit cleaner. Now I want to go to the bottom of the document. And I want to do one more time, references, insert index, and this time I simply want to say OK. Now there was originally an index here, so I'm going to replace that index. And you'll see that it has found all the instances of all the phrases where I had used one of those words and put the page number for each one of them. Now there's a lot of investment in setting up the concordance or setting up the index list so that you have that list of words to choose from. But the payoff is, as you can see here, I can apply this as many times as I want to, refresh it, expand on the list. It makes keeping up with those words a lot simpler, putting them in one place and then appending it onto this working document.
We have seen how to use Word to manage the appearance of the document using the styles and themes. We have reviewed how to look deeper into the quality of the content, looking at proofreading tools. And we've given the reader an index that helps them to look for words and phrases in a convenient and familiar fashion. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to this channel for more content in the future. Thank you.